This is a true story from a deep web user. It's why I'll never go online again. My name is Leo, or at least it was. The person I am now doesn't really have a name. Names are for people with lives, with credit cards, with social media profiles and email addresses. I have none of those things. I'm writing this on a second-hand air-gapped laptop running a lightweight version of Linux from a USB stick. The battery has about 2 hours left, and when it's done, I'll wipe the drive and ditch the machine. I'll pay a stranger in cash to upload this file from a public library. A message in a bottle, tossed into the digital ocean I can no longer sail. This is not a cautionary tale about the dangers of the internet. We all know those. This is a story about a door I found online, opened, and stepped through. The problem is, I didn't realize it was a one-way trip, and that something else could come back through in my place. It started, as these things often do, with boredom. I worked in IT for a mid-sized insurance company. My job was a mind-numbing cycle of password resets, software updates, and telling people to try turning it off and on again. I was good at it, which was part of the problem. I was overqualified and understimulated. My life was a flat line of predictable routines. Wake up, commute, troubleshoot, commute, eat a microwave dinner, watch something on a streaming service, sleep, rinse and repeat. My expertise with networks and systems gave me a certain arrogance. I thought I understood the internet, top to bottom. I saw it as a tool, a landscape I had mastered. The dark web or deep web was, to me, just another part of that landscaper. Grimy, unlit backalley, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. I had all the tools, a dedicated VPN, a Tor browser, an encrypted hard drive. I felt like a tourist visiting a supposedly dangerous neighborhood, safely insulated inside an armored bus. My first few forays were exactly what you'd expect. Clunky, slow-loading forums with edgy names, conspiracy theories about aliens and the government, black markets for drugs and stolen data that I had no interest in. It was mostly hype. It was boring. For a while, I almost gave up. Then I found a link on a semi-private IRC channel. It wasn't advertised, just mentioned in passing. The URL was a typical onion string of garbled letters and numbers. But the name someone had given it was the Panopticon. The name should have been my first warning. The Panopticon is a type of prison design where a single guard can observe all the inmates without them being able to tell whether they are being watched. It creates a sense of constant, invisible surveillance. When the site finally loaded, it was stark and minimalist. A black background with a single line of white text. The world is a stage. We just provide the seats. Below, it was a grid of thumbnail-sized video feeds, dozens of them. They were all live. I clicked on one. It was a grainy Langle shot of a cat sleeping on a sofa. Another showed a baby's crib in a dark room, the soft rise and fall of a blanket visible in the night vision green. A third was a high-angle shot of an empty office kitchen. There was no sound, just silent, unending observation. I realized what I was looking at. A collection of hacked webcams, security cameras, baby monitors, and God knows what else. It was a voyeur's paradise. I felt a pang of disgust, a knot tightening in my stomach. This was a profound invasion of privacy. I should have closed the window. I should have wiped my machine and walked away, but I didn't. Curiosity is a powerful, venomous thing. I spent hours just watching these mundane, stolen moments of life. A man snoring in bed, a woman washing dishes, an empty hallway where a light would occasionally flicker on and off. There was a chat box next to the video feeds, where anonymous users with generated names like User734 and ObserverX made banal comments. Cat is twitching, dreaming. Think the guy in 1-to-be is going bald. That light in 2A has been flickering for a week. So annoying. It felt weirdly sterile, almost scientific. Then, I saw the interaction tab. This was the site's real hook. Users could pool cryptocurrency Bitcoin, Monero to vote on actions. If enough money was contributed to a specific feed, the site's administrators, who called themselves the overseers, would interact. They clearly had a deeper level of control over the networks these devices were on. I watched it happen for the first time on a feed labeled Suburban Kitchen. A woman was making a sandwich. A funding goal was met, and the text interaction, radio, flashed on the screen. A moment later, the smart speaker on her counter crackled to life, playing a distorted music box version of Pop Goes the Weasel at full volume. The woman jumped, dropping her knife. She looked around, terrified and confused, before unplugging the device. The chat erupted with laughing emojis and cruel jokes. I felt sick, but I also felt a jolt, a morbid thrill. This wasn't passive viewing, this was active. It was a game. A horrible, twisted game, but a game nonetheless. Over the next few weeks, I descended. I went from a silent observer to an active participant. I told myself it was harmless. I only ever contributed to the small stuff. Flickering a light in an empty room, changing the channel on someone's smart TV. I never participated in the crueler interactions, like blasting terrifying noises through a baby monitor or turning a smart thermostat all the way up in the middle of the night. That was my line. That's what I told myself to feel better. But the line kept moving. A new feed appeared one day. It was different. It was high definition, perfectly framed, and stable. It was labeled simply, the subject. The feed showed a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, in a small, modern apartment. We learned her name was Anna from a piece of mail on her counter. Unlike the other feeds, this one was always active. The camera seemed to follow her, switching between different viewpoints: laptop, webcam, a TV camera, a camera in her ceiling light fixture. The overseers had total control here. The subject became the main event on the Panopticon. The interactions were more personal, more sadistic. They would lock her out of her own social media accounts and post bizarre messages. They'd order hundreds of dollars of takeout to her apartment. They'd use her smart speaker to whisper her name when she was sleeping. I watched her life slowly unravel. She became paranoid, anxious. She had guys come and sweep her apartment for bugs, but they never found anything because the compromises were deep in the building's own network infrastructure, not her personal devices. She started talking to herself. She looked exhausted, haunted. The chat was a cesspool of gleeful cruelty. And I was there, reading it all, watching it all. I never contributed crypto to her feed, but my silence was complicity. My viewership was validation. I was part of the mob, hidden in the digital darkness. One night, the stakes were raised. A bounty was posted by the overseers, a massive one. Enough Bitcoin to change a person's life. The goal, to move the interaction from digital to physical. The bounty was for anyone who could identify her building and get inside. This was it. The line I swore I wouldn't cross. This was no longer a prank. This was real-world stalking, with the intent to do what? The bounty's description was chillingly vague. Initiate final interaction. I felt a surge of adrenaline and revulsion. I had to do something. I started trying to find her myself, not for the bounty, but to warn her. I used my own IT skills, analyzing the video feeds for clues. A reflection in the window, a logo on a coffee cup, the specific sound of a distant siren. I was good, better than I thought. After 2 days of obsessive work, I found her. I figured out the city, the neighborhood, even the apartment building. My plan was to send an anonymous tip to the local police, give them the address and a link to the Panopticon, and hope they'd take it seriously. I would be the anonymous hero. It would absolve me of my sins of observation. I was finalizing the email when a new message popped up on the Panopticon site. It wasn't in the public chat. It was a direct message, just for me. The sender was listed as Overseer 1. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had they noticed my digital sleuthing? Did they know what I was about to do? I clicked the message. User 912. It began. Using my anonymous handle. We've been watching your activity. Your analytical skills are impressive. Far superior to the average user. You see the patterns. You understand the system. We like that. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I kept reading. You passed the test. You found the subject. Most only watch, but you engage on a higher level. You are ready for a promotion. We are granting you administrative access to a new stream. Consider it a reward. Your very own project. Below the text was a single hyperlink. My mind raced. A trap, a trick, or was this real? The arrogance that had led me here flared up one last time. A promotion, administrative access. Maybe I could use this. Maybe I could get inside their system and shut it down. Be a real hero. I took a deep breath, my mouse hovering over the link. A single click. That's all it took. The page loaded. It was a single high-definition video feed, just like the subject. The quality was perfect. The lighting was dim, cast from the glow of a computer monitor. The angle was familiar. It was from a webcam, perched on top of a screen. I saw a man sitting in a chair, his back mostly to the camera. He was hunched over a keyboard, his face illuminated by the screen. He was wearing a gray hoodie. My grey hoodie. He was in an apartment with a poster for a vintage sci-fi movie on the wall. My poster. My blood turned to ice. My breath hitched in my throat. It was me. The feed was a live stream of me, right now, in my own apartment. There was a few-second delay. I watched the figure on the screen raise a trembling hand to his mouth, and a moment later, I felt my own hand touch my lips. I wanted to scream, but the air was gone from my lungs. My eyes darted to the webcam on my monitor. The little green light was on. It had never been on before. I always checked. Then, the chat box next to my video feed appeared. It was the same chat from the Panopticon, but now, they were talking about me. Observer X, look at him. He gets it now. User 734, welcome to the stage. User 912, or should we say Leo. Watcher_Z, he looks scared. I like this one better than Anna. My name, they knew my name. A new message appeared, this one highlighted in red. It was from Overseer 1. Welcome to the Panopticon. Leo, you are the new subject. We are all so excited to get to know you. Time for your first interaction. As I read the words, my smart lights flickered once, then went out, plunging my apartment into darkness, save for the hellish glow of my monitor. The speakers on my desk, which were powered off, crackled to life. A distorted music box melody began to play. Pop goes the weasel. I finally found my voice and screamed. I launched myself away from the desk, stumbling backward over my chair. On the screen, I could see my own panicked silhouette flailing in the dark. The chat was flooded with laughing emoji. My smart lock on the front door clicked loudly. Locked. The terror was absolute. I was no longer an observer. I was the observed. I was the entertainment. Every vulnerability I had exploited in others was now being turned against me. They had been in my system for weeks, maybe months, watching me watch them. They had built this cage around me while I was busy looking into someone else's. The subject wasn't just Anna. It was a job opening, and I had just been hired. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the heavy base of a lamp and I smashed everything. I shattered my monitors. I brought the lamp down again and again on my PC tower, on my router, on my phone, until my hands were bleeding and the room was filled with the smell of ozone and shattered plastic. I cut myself off. A frantic, brutal amputation from the network. I broke down my own front door with my shoulder and ran. I left everything behind: my wallet, my keys, my life. I didn't stop running for 10 blocks. That was 6 months ago. I live in the shadows now, a ghost in the analog world. I work for cash under the table. I sleep in rundown motels that don't ask for ID. And I never, ever stay in one place for long. I have no phone, no bank account, no online presence. Every security camera on a street corner feels like an eye watching me. Every person staring at their phone feels like an observer. The Panopticon isn't just a website, it's a philosophy, and its members are everywhere. They're watching. I don't know what the final interaction is, and I pray to a God I don't believe in that I never find out. So, this is my story. This is my warning. The next time you're online, browsing in the safety of your own home, just remember that the window you're looking through might just be a mirror, and you might not like what you see looking back. My small town has a horror rule that no one dares to break. We broke it. There are 2 things you need to know about my hometown. Heavenwood. The first is that, from a distance, it looks like a postcard. It's nestled in a valley in the Appalachian foothills, all old-growth forests, a winding river, and a main street with brick buildings that haven't changed much in 100 years. The second thing you need to know is that Heavenwood is never, ever quiet. Not during the day, obviously. You get the usual sounds, cars, kids playing, the distant buzz of the sawmill. But I'm talking about the night, when the sun dips below the western ridge and the sky bleeds from orange to deep indigo. A new soundscape begins. It's a soft, constant, metallic symphony. The sound of wind chimes. Every house has them, not just 1 or 2. I'm talking about dozens. They hang from every porch, every tree branch, every eave. Copper pipes, bamboo stalks, delicate glass, and heavy iron, all of them singing to the slightest breeze. It was the soundtrack to my childhood, a gentle, omnipresent lullaby that promised safety. The rule was simple, unspoken but absolute. Never let the chimes stop. If a chime broke, you fixed it before sunset. If you moved into a new house, your welcome basket from the neighbors would include a set of wind chimes. You didn't ask why, you just hung them. It was as much a part of living in Havenwood as paying property taxes. We all knew the stories, of course. The ghost stories kids tell around campfires. They said something lived in the silence, something old and hungry that the founders of the town had made a deal with. The chimes were a ward, a fence made of sound. As long as the melody played, it stayed in the deep woods, in the hollows where the air was always cold. We all laughed at the stories, but we all made sure our chimes were in good working order. My group of friends, me, Jake, Liam, Maya, and Chloe, were born and raised in this town. We were a product of its strange traditions, but by the time we were 17, the summer before our senior year, the traditions started to feel less like a safety net and more like a cage. Liam was the one who started it. He'd always been the skeptic, the one to push boundaries. "It's a stupid superstition," he said one humid July evening. We were sitting on the bleachers overlooking the high school football field, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and the unending, gentle tink-tink-clink from the houses surrounding us. Think about it. We're prisoners to a noise. We've probably got collective tinnitus and don't even know it. "It's not that bad," Maya countered, always the pragmatist. "It's just what we do." "But why?" Liam insisted, his voice rising with frustration. "Because of some spook story about a monster that's scared of a little music. We're not kids anymore. Has anyone, in the last 200 years, ever actually seen anything?" No one had an answer. The monster of Havenwood was like a local legend. You knew the story, but you didn't know anyone who'd actually met the guy. "I say we test it," Liam said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Just for a few minutes. We find a spot, create a little bubble of silence, and see what happens. Nothing will happen, and then we'll know for sure that this whole town is crazy." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The idea felt sacrilegious, like spray painting a church. "I don't know, man," I mumbled. "What's the point?" "The point is freedom, Jake," he proclaimed, spreading his arms wide. "The point is not living our lives based on a fairy tale." Chloe, who was always the most sensitive, shivered despite the heat. "My grandma told me the silence doesn't just attract it, it invites it. She said it hears the quiet like a dinner bell." Liam just laughed. "See, more ghost stories." But the idea was planted. Like a toxic seed, it grew over the next week. Liam's relentless logic and mockery wore us down. What were we so afraid of? An old story. We were practically adults. It was time to act like it. We agreed. The plan was terrifyingly simple. We would go out to the old Miller property, a derelict farmhouse and a few acres of overgrown fields that bordered the national forest. It was far enough from the town that no one would notice, and the house itself had been stripped of its chimes decades ago. The surrounding trees, however, were still littered with them, placed there by generations of nervous townsfolk. Our mission: create a perfect circle of silence, about 100 yards across, and wait. We met the following Saturday, just as dusk was settling. We brought flashlights and wire cutters. The walk to the Miller place was tense. The symphony of chimes from the town grew fainter with every step, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. When we reached the edge of the property, the last, lonely set of chimes, heavy iron pipes, hanging from a dead oaks, sang a deep, mournful tone in the evening breeze. "This is the last one," Liam announced, pulling out his cutters. "The edge of our circle. Everyone ready?" No one said a word. With a metallic snip, the wires gave way, and the heavy pipes fell to the ground with a dull thud. And then, silence. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. My ears felt like they had cotton stuffed in them. The crickets stopped chirping. The wind itself seemed to die. Every sound we made the crunch of our feet on dry leaves. Our own ragged breaths was unnaturally loud, an intrusion on a profound and ancient stillness. "See," Liam whispered, his voice sounding thin and weak. "Nothing, just quiet." But it wasn't just quiet, it was an absence, a pressure. The air grew cold, the kind of deep, damp cold that seeps into your bones. I could feel the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck stand on end. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, huddled together in the oppressive vacuum. That's when we heard it, or rather, didn't hear it. From the direction of the deep woods, a sound started moving toward us. But it was the sound of something being erased. A branch snapped, but the sound was clipped, swallowed before it could fully register. A patch of rustling leaves went dead silent, as if a giant cosmic mute button was being pressed down on that specific spot. Something was moving through the forest, and its very presence devoured sound. "What was that?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "Probably just a deer," Liam said, but his bravado was gone. His face was pale in the moonlight. The pressure in my ears intensified. It felt like we were at the bottom of a deep ocean. I had the undeniable, primal sensation of being watched, hunted. Then, from the darkness just beyond the tree line, we saw it. It's hard to describe because it wasn't really there. It was more like a hole in the world, a vaguely man-shaped patch of night that was somehow darker than the surrounding blackness. It didn't reflect any light. It absorbed it. It was a walking, silent void. We didn't scream. We couldn't. It felt like the air had been stolen from our lungs. We were frozen, mesmerized by the sheer wrongness of it. The shape took a step forward, and the ground beneath its feet didn't crunch. The grass and twigs simply became silent, as if they never existed. It was moving toward us, drawn to the silent clearing we had so arrogantly created. Maya was the first to break the spell. She let out a choked sob and turned, running back toward the town. That was all it took. Primal fear took over, and we all ran, crashing through the undergrowth, not daring to look back. We didn't stop until we heard it, the faint, distant, beautiful sound of the first wind chime on the edge of town. We collapsed in a heap, gasping for air, our hearts pounding. We had survived. We were safe. We were wrong. The next day, a grim, unspoken tension hung between the four of us. We didn't talk about what we saw. We didn't have to. The terror was a living thing we now shared. We thought that by returning to the sound, we had escaped. But we had been noticed. We had issued an invitation, and it seemed the hush as we started calling it in hushed, terrified whispers wasn't going to forget us. Strange things started to happen. At night, I'd be in my room, surrounded by the sound of my family's chimes, and I'd suddenly feel that pressure in my ears again. I'd look out my window and see a patch of my yard where the moonlight seemed to bend and disappear. A patch of perfect, silent darkness. Chloe saw it outside her school. Maya saw it across the river while she was fishing. It was stalking us. It couldn't enter the sound, but it was waiting just on the edge, patient. We were marked. We had broken the rule, and now the silence was following us. Liam was taking it the hardest. He was consumed by guilt. "This is my fault," he'd say over and over, his face haggard and his eyes wide with sleepless terror. "I brought this on us." We tried to live normally, but it was impossible. We were haunted. The gentle chiming of the town no longer felt like a lullaby. It felt like the ticking of a clock, a constant reminder of the silent, hungry thing that was waiting for a single moment of quiet. The climax came a week later, during the annual Town Founders' Day picnic. The entire town was at the park, a wide-open space in the center of Havenwood. For this one day, temporary poles were set up all around the park's perimeter, hung with hundreds of extra chimes, creating a massive safe zone. It was supposed to be the safest place in town. We were sitting on a picnic blanket, trying to pretend everything was normal, when a freak summer storm rolled in. The sky turned a bruised purple-gray, and the wind began to howl. At first, the chimes went wild, a chaotic, clanging roar that was almost deafening. It was a wall of pure noise. And then the rain started, a torrential downpour. The wind died as suddenly as it had arrived. The rain was so thick and heavy that it dampened the sound, coating the metal and wood of the chimes, muffling their song. The chaotic symphony dwindled to a weak, pathetic plinking, and then, in certain spots, nothing at all. Pockets of silence began to form around the park. Panic erupted, not because of the storm, but because of the quiet. People started grabbing their kids, scrambling to get back to their homes, but it was too late. I felt the pressure in my ears, more intense than ever before. Through the sheets of rain, I saw it, not one, dozens. They were emerging from the edges of the woods, drawn by the pockets of failing sound, holes in the fabric of reality, all drifting silently toward the terrified crowd. Our group was near the edge of the park, and one of the voids was moving directly for us. It glided over the wet grass, leaving a trail of absolute silence in its wake. We were paralyzed. That's when Liam stood up. His face was a mask of grim resolution. He looked at me, at Maya, at Chloe, and for the first time in a week, the terror in his eyes was replaced by a defiant calm. "I opened the door," he said, his voice barely a whisper against the rain. "I have to be the one to close it." Before any of us could react, he did the bravest, stupidest thing I have ever seen. He ran. He ran away from us, away from the flimsy protection of the nearest chimes, and sprinted straight into a wide, silent clearing in the middle of the field. He stopped, turned to face the approaching void, and screamed. It was a raw, primal yell of rage and fear and sacrifice. The hush stopped. It seemed to hesitate, drawn to this sudden, solitary sound in a sea of encroaching silence. It changed direction, moving directly toward Liam. We watched in horror as the void enveloped him. His scream didn't end in a gurgle or a choke. It was just gone. One moment he was there, a vibrant, screaming human being, and the next, the hole in the world passed over him, and there was nothing. No body, no blood, no sound. He was simply erased from existence. The rain stopped as suddenly as it started. The sun broke through the clouds, and a breeze picked up, and all at once, the 1,000 chimes of heavenward began to sing again, a bright, clear, beautiful song. The other shapes were gone. Liam's sacrifice had appeased it, or maybe his scream, followed by the perfect silence of his erasure, was what it had wanted all along. I left heavenward a month later and never went back. I live in a city now, a place filled with noise 24/7, sirens, traffic, music, people. I need it. I can't stand the quiet. Sometimes, when I am lying in bed late at night, and there's a momentary lull in the city's hum, I feel that familiar pressure in my ears. I know the truth of my hometown. We are not prisoners to the noise. The noise is what keeps us from becoming prisoners to the silence. And I know that somewhere, in a small town nestled in the mountains, a symphony of wind chimes is playing, not as a tradition, but as a desperate, unending prayer against the thing that waits and listens for the music to finally stop. We broke the rule. We learned that the stories were true, and one of us paid the price for that knowledge. I found a VHS tape in my attic. What I saw was a true horror story. The house was my grandfather's. After he passed, my parents, ever the pragmatists, decided to rent it out, but after a decade of tenants and neglect, it was in rough shape. They offered me a deal, live there rent-free for a year if I could fix it up. I was 26, working a dead-end graphic design job, and living in an apartment the size of a walk-in closet. It was a no-brainer. The house was a classic 1950s suburban two-story, solid and unassuming, but it had a history. My grandfather bought it in the early 90s from a family who had apparently left in a hurry. Got it for a song, he used to say with a wink. They just wanted out. I never thought to ask why. The attic was the worst part. A cramped, triangular space under the eaves, choked with the hot, thick smell of old wood, fiberglass insulation, and forgotten things. On a rainy Saturday in October, armed with a headlamp and a dust mask, I decided to finally clear it out. It was a tomb of my family's past, boxes of my dad's old comic books, my grandmother's Christmas decorations, a crib I probably slept in. Tucked away in a dark corner, behind a stack of water-stained encyclopedias, was a small, plain cardboard box. There was no writing on it. Inside, nestled in yellowed newspaper, was a single VHS tape. It was also completely blank. No label, no scrawled in Florida Vacation 94. Just a black plastic rectangle. It felt heavier than I remembered tapes being. Colder. Curiosity got the better of me. That evening, after hours of cleaning, I dug out the old VCR TV combo I kept for nostalgia. The kind with the fat, curved CRT screen. I pushed the tape into the slot. The VCR accepted it, with a loud clunk and a mechanical whir. I hit play. The screen flickered to life with a burst of static, then resolved into a shaky, handheld image. The quality was poor, typical for the format. The timestamp in the corner read Sept 12, 1992. It was a home movie, a kid's birthday party. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, with a messy mop of brown hair, was blowing out the candles on a superhero-themed cake. A handful of other kids and a pair of smiling adults, presumably the parents, were singing. It was painfully, beautifully ordinary. I watched for about 10 minutes. The camera followed the boy, Timmy, as he opened presents and played with his friends in a sunny backyard. I recognized the yard. It was the one attached to this house. These were the people who lived here before my grandfather. I was about to fast forward, feeling like a voyeur, when I saw something. In the background of a shot, as the dad filmed Timmy on the swing set, there was a figure standing by the far fence line, partially obscured by an old oak tree. It was tall and unnaturally thin. It was too far away to make out details, but it was wearing what looked like dark, ill-fitting clothes. I rewound the tape and played it again. The figure was perfectly still, just watching. The dad filming never seemed to notice. I brushed it off. A neighbor, a trick of the light. The tape cut to a new scene. OCT 31, 1992, Halloween night. Timmy was dressed as a ghost, a classic white sheet with eye holes cut out. He was walking up the driveway of this very house, holding a plastic pumpkin bucket. The mum was filming. "Say trick or treat for the camera, sweetie," she said, her voice warm but a little muffled by the old microphone. As Timmy turned to the camera, grinning, I saw it again. Across the street, standing behind a parked car, under a flickering streetlight, the same tall, thin figure. This time, I felt a knot of ice form in my gut. There was no mistaking it. It was standing in a way that wasn't right. Its limbs seemed too long, its posture too rigid. It was just watching. The tape continued. A few more scenes, each a few weeks apart. Christmas morning, building a snowman in the front yard. Each clip was a perfect slice of suburban Americana. And in almost every one, if you looked closely, the figure was there. In the background, at the edge of the frame, a silent, unmoving spectator to their lives. It was never acknowledged. The family seemed completely oblivious. The final scene on the tape was dated January 19, 1993. It was late at night. The camera was set up on a tripod in the corner of the living room, my living room. The quality was worse, the lighting dim. The dad, mum, and Timmy were on the sofa, huddled together under a blanket, watching TV. The audio was just the low murmur of whatever show they had on. For a full minute, nothing happened. I could feel the tension radiating through the screen, a silent dread. The family wasn't relaxed. Their eyes kept darting towards the darkened hallway that led to the front door. Then, I saw him. He was standing in the archway of the hall. The static man. That's the only way I can describe him. He wasn't a man in a mask. His form was a roiling, chaotic scramble of television static, like a dead channel given human shape. He had no face, just a churning vortex of black and white noise where a head should be. He made no sound, but the audio on the tape became distorted, filled with a low, humming buzz whenever he was in the frame. The family on the couch was frozen in sheer terror. The dad had his arms wrapped around his wife and son, his knuckles white. Timmy had buried his face in his mother's side. The static man took a step into the room. It didn't walk like a person. It glided, its form flickering and distorting with each movement. The humming grew louder. It raised a long, static-filled arm and pointed. Not at the family, it pointed directly at the camera. My blood ran cold. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. A home video camera from 1993 was now an object of absolute menace. The dad on the tape finally broke his paralysis. He let out a strangled cry and lunged for the camera. The screen went to a violent blizzard of static as the camera was knocked over. The audio was a mess of terrified screams, the deafening hum, and a sound I can only describe as wet, electrical crackling. Then, silence. The tape went blue. I sat there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs, the TV casting a pale, sickly light on my face. My breath came in ragged gasps. What the hell did I just watch? A snuff film, an elaborate, twisted prank. It felt too real. The fear on their faces was too genuine. I ejected the tape, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I put it back in the box and shoved it into the back of a closet, wanting to forget I ever saw it. But I couldn't. The image of that static figure was burned into my mind. Over the next few days, my house began to feel different. The normal creaks and groans of an old building became sinister. I started hearing a faint, low hum at night, so quiet that I thought it was the refrigerator or the furnace. But it sounded electronic, like the hum from the tape. I started seeing things in the corner of my eye. A flicker of movement in a dark hallway, a distortion in the air that looked like heat haze. But the room was cold. I told myself I was just scaring myself, that the tape had gotten into my head. My breaking point came a week later. I was working late on a project, sitting at my computer in the same living room from the video. The only light was my monitor. Suddenly, the screen flickered. For a split second, the image was replaced by a churning wall of black and white static. The low hum filled my ears, loud and clear this time. Then my screen returned to normal. I jumped up, my chair clattering against the hardwood floor. I was officially terrified. This wasn't in my head. I had to know what happened to that family. I went online, digging through old town records and news archives. It took me hours, but I found it. A small article from the local paper, dated January 22nd, 1993. Local family vanishes. Police baffled. The Bradley family, Mark, Susan, and their 8-year-old son, Timothy. They had disappeared from their home without a trace. There were no signs of a struggle. Their car was still in the garage. All their belongings were in the house. The police report mentioned a strange detail. Every television and electronic device in the house had been destroyed, smashed to pieces from the inside out, as if hit by a massive power surge. They were never seen or heard from again. This was the house. They were the family on the tape. The true story part of the title isn't about their horror, it's about mine, because their story isn't over. I realized the tape wasn't just a recording, it was a window, or worse, a doorway, against every instinct screaming at me to stop. I knew I had to watch it one more time. I needed to see something, anything, that could explain what was happening. I pulled the VCR out, my hands slick with sweat, and put the tape in. I fast-forwarded to the final scene. The family on the couch, the static man in the hallway, the unbearable tension. This time, I didn't look at the creature. I looked at the boy, Timmy. He was crying silently, his small body trembling. Then, he slowly lifted his head and looked away from the static monster in his living room. His terrified eyes moved across the screen until they met mine. He looked directly at me, through the decades, through the magnetic tape and the cathode ray tube. His lips parted, and he mouthed a single, silent word. Run. At that exact moment, the static man, who had been focused on the family, slowly, impossibly, turned its head. The churning vortex of its face rotated away from the Bradleys. It tilted its head as if listening to a distant sound. It was looking past the family, past the camera. It was looking into my living room. Then, every light in my house went out. The TV screen went black with a pop. I was plunged into absolute darkness and a silence so profound it hurt my ears. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. And then I saw it, in the reflection of the dead, black television screen. A faint flickering silhouette standing behind my couch. A tall, thin shape made of shimmering, dancing static. It was no longer in their time. It was in mine. The hum started again, not from the TV speakers, but from the air all around me. It was in the room with me. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a solid ball of ice. I did the only thing I could. I scrambled backward, tripping over my coffee table, and I ran. I burst out my front door and into the cold night air, not even bothering to grab my keys or my wallet. I just ran until my lungs burned and the streetlights of my neighborhood blurred into streaks of tears and terror. I never went back to the house. I called my parents from a payphone and told them there was a gas leak, a fire, anything I could think of. I abandoned everything I owned. I'm writing this from a motel room 3 states away. I don't stay anywhere for long. I can't, because sometimes, late at night, I hear it. That low, electronic hum. Sometimes, I see it. A flicker of static in my reflection in a dark window or on a powered-off phone screen. The tape wasn't a recording of what happened to the Bradley family. It was a trap. The thing on the tape doesn't hunt. It waits. It waits for someone to watch. It waits for an open window, for a pair of curious eyes to give it a new place to exist. I looked in, and it saw me. It attached itself to me. So, this is my warning. If you ever find an old piece of media, a tape, a film, a file, with no label and no history, leave it alone. Destroy it. Don't watch it. Because some stories are true, not because they happened in the past, but because they are still happening now. You press play, you open the door, and you might just become the sequel.